My name is Jocelyn Fritz. I'm with the City of Santa Barbara, and I'll be moderating tonight's public comment, navigating the slides, and taking roll. So once again, thank you for everyone who came tonight. And so with that, we'll jump right in and start with a roll call. Alrighty, Honorable Chair Johnson.
Present.
Honorable Commissioner Khan.
Present.
Honorable Commissioner Allen White.
Present.
Great. Okay, I will hand this over to Michelle now.
Thank you, Jocelyn. Good evening, everyone. We first wanted to get started with a few housekeeping items. First of all, translation services are available for tonight's public hearing. That includes Spanish and American Sign Language. We will also have public comment periods throughout today's agenda, as well as time for questions at the end. Next slide, please. Para las personas que deseen escuchar esta presentación en español, favor de seguir las siguientes indicaciones. Hasta abajo de su pantalla se encuentra un pequeño mundo. Mueva su cursor encima del mismo. Aparecerá una ventana indicando inglés o español. Presione español. Listo. Podrá usted escuchar la voz del intérprete en español. Next slide, please. Here we have an overview of today's agenda. We'll begin with public comment, followed by the approval of meeting minutes, an introduction of national demographics, the city's demographer, as well as presentation by the demographer, and a discussion of the public input and map drawing period for the public's engagement. And we will conclude with a discussion of future agendas. We may now begin the public comment period if there's any public comment.
Okay, let's see. It looks like we have an attendee's hand is raised. So how this is going to work, Howard Pixel, I see your hand is raised. So for tonight's period, we actually are allotting 10 minutes for people that are representing individuals themselves. And then there will be a 15-minute allocation if you are representing a group. So let's see here. And the way it's going to work is I will unmute you and then please unmute yourself and then you can begin speaking. And please let me know if you're representing just yourself or a group tonight. All right, Howard Pixel, you are now unmuted.
Hello, my last name is not Pixel, but I'm talking to you on a Pixel phone. I'm sorry. I'm Howard Green. I participated 5 years ago when the first round went on, and it was a very interesting step. In that round, I was able to see data and not depend on a front-end interface that blocked my view of the data. So although the system looks very interesting, I've already been onto the system. There are interesting instructions, but no one has answered my question as to how we get to the data that the state has supplied with the corrections over what the Census Department provided. So that's my first comment. My second comment is that the system really is set up for non-computer people, which is great. The fact that I want access to Excel files is not something that would be a general need, but I believe that it falls within the scope of this public access. Further, the time period that has been allotted for the access, at least when I looked at the website last week, it may have been changed, was limited to, I think, the end of the year. That's not very appropriate for something that has 6 public comment periods out in the field, as it were, another meeting of this commission, and then a city council meeting. So I believe the data should be accessible as it is now, or any corrections or improvements that are made, until the city council has actually approved the mapping. We have an opportunity in public comment in that meeting to express concerns if we see pockets or lines that are strangely drawn. Personally, I think the job that was done 5 years ago was very, very good. And since the population shift has only been modest, I think you said in the last meeting it was either 500, 700, something in that order for the total population, although the shifts within districts is greater, that it doesn't require as much effort as seems to be being placed on the 2020 reapportionment. I'm sure that there was an overabundance of caution to make sure that all districts, as it were represented. But in fact, it's worked pretty well for the last few years. I'm also concerned at the process. It's not been clearly defined of how we will see the staff recommendations right out of the box. Now, of course, this is the training session tonight, so I'm sure some of that will come up. I hope this is being recorded because I will not be able to stay for the full session as I have a class out at the university this evening. The time allotted is wonderful, so I will probably wrap up now, but perhaps as items appear on the agenda or are discussed on the agenda, I'll be able to still make public comment on those items. Thank you much, Your Honors, for agreeing to serve on this. I hope that some of the meetings will be face-to-face. I think there's a chance of that in the planning. I don't think there need to be 6 meetings, though. There were litigants last time. I don't think there are litigants this time. So making, quote, equal time available everywhere in the city seems an excess. I'd like to suggest that the public meetings that you discuss later this evening or later on this agenda be condensed or all be made accessible by Zoom. It's a poor second to being there, but I'm not going to travel to all 6 districts to observe and comment on the process. I think somebody probably is applauding right now. No, I'm serious because it is an important process that we're doing. The recent election shows that at least part of our city charter may need to be amended. Although that's slightly beyond the scope of this commission, I think a recommendation from this commission would be in order that having people with a few years ago, 20 or 30%, this year perhaps with 40%, taking the mayoral position is really an offense to the democratic process. Now, I understand that primaries in California are partisan, but there's no reason why the city could not, perhaps with charter changes, make for a runoff if no one gets over 50%, unless, of course, there are only 3 candidates or maybe 2 candidates, I don't know, whatever the right number is, so that we have a chance to express ourselves again. Some communities use a second choice type of balloting system. I'm not sure exactly what it's called, but it allows you to indicate a second choice. My first choice didn't make it. I'd like a chance to express myself again. So with that, I think I'm going to return the time and thank you for your attention. I welcome any questions. I will leave my phone open in case someone would like to reply. Thank you.
Okay.
All right. If there are any other attendees that would like to leave a public comment, please raise your hand. Alrighty, I don't see any other hands raised at this point in time, so that might be it for now.
Thank you, Jocelyn. I think that we can now move on to the approval of previous meeting minutes.
Good evening, everyone. I assume the members of the commission saw the September 20th minutes. Any comments, clarifications, questions, amendments?
Yeah, again, I'm going to look for some ratification for my comments now with regard to who was present. But I seem to notice on the September 20th meeting that while there are certain people mentioned as having been present, there were also certain people that I believe were present that were not mentioned. They included Tony Ruggieri, Jocelyn Fritz, and Brian Damori. So,
I usually take notes on who was present, and I honestly don't have it on the September 20th one for some reason.
I show that Jocelyn Fritz is mentioned as staff present.
Oh, I see her on top, so I delete that one. So it would leave Tony Ruggieri and Brian Damori.
I have no recollection.
All right, well.
Commissioners, if I may, this is Brian Damore, and I can attest to the fact that I was there as a staff person. Tony Ruggieri, he does our city TV type stuff kind of behind the scenes. So I'm not sure that I would qualify him as present. He's just kind of working the logistics normally on these meetings.
And with that clarification, I would simply ask that that Mr. Diamori, I'm sorry if I'm torturing the pronunciation of your name, be added as someone who was also present at the September 20th, 2021 meeting.
All right, Judge White, any comment on that?
No, with that amendment, I would make a motion to approve.
I actually have, and I have another comment that I wanted to make on something different on the minutes. I asked a question about the use of incumbency in determining the boundaries because there seemed to be a conflict in the description. And the answer that I received was, I thought, a very carefully and well explained and represented a true respect for the voters' rights. And I don't know that that's really reflected very well in the way it's written. What I remember the answer being was that we disregard incumbency in terms of trying to protect any incumbent. But if we have a district line that now puts one incumbent outside of the district and leaves one inside of the district, such that the voters would not have an opportunity to vote to retain or replace both of those, that if we can fairly draw the line to retain the ability of both incumbents to run in their districts, that we would do that. so that the voters have the opportunity to replace them or retain them. Am I saying that correctly, Dr. Phillips, or about how you explained it? Because I just don't think that comes through in the description of your answer to my question.
Yeah,
in the minutes.
From what I recall, I explained it where you can't really consider incumbency when you're going through the state criteria, and especially when it comes to determining communities of interest and such, incumbency should play no role in that. But if you've ensured that you've satisfied the state criteria, and you can make a minor adjustment that will enable voters to have the ability to reelect an incumbent, then that could be a consideration. I know my boss, Doug Johnson, is on the call right now, and so if there's anything he might have to add to that, I can let him elaborate.
No, I think you said it very well.
Okay.
I'm not exactly certain how to amend, because it's a little involved what I just explained, but let's see. Traditional redistricting principles can be considered, and incumbency must be considered. This is under the section title IRC discussion. I think I would perhaps amend to add that the intention is to allow the voters to determine whether an incumbent should be retained or replaced, rather than have the commission eliminate that option for them. Does that say it adequately, Dr. Phillips, Dr. Johnson?
Yeah, I think that works. Yeah. It's hard to put it in a brief minute summary, of course.
Judge White, Judge Kahn, any comment on that?
I think that says it. And again, I would move to approve with the amendments.
Okay, then I'll do you want me to just restate the way I wanted to amend? I suggested amending it. Or did you get it, Michelle, or who is ever having to make notes of this?
We were able to have that written down, but if you would like to restate for both the commissioners to agree, that's also okay.
No, I think it's fine. I think they understood that my goal was to make sure that what this reflected was the goal is to not deprive voters of the right to choose. All right, Judge White has moved to approve the minutes as amended. Second?
Second.
Any objections? Okay, the minutes are approved. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Johnson. And now I would like to turn over the next portion of the hearing to Mr. Brian Demore, the city engineer and lead staff on the redistricting project, as well as Dr. Phillips, our demographer from National Demographics Corporation.
Okay, thank you, and good evening, honorable commissioners. My name is Brian Demore. I'm the city engineer here for the city of Santa Barbara. I'm also managing the logistical and technical aspects of the redistricting process for the city of Santa Barbara. And tonight I'm happy to introduce to you all Dr. Daniel Phillips from National Demographics Corporation, our demographer who is providing technical services to the city of Santa Barbara. Dr. Phillips will be presenting an introduction into the redistricting process and also provide a brief tutorial on how the public can get involved in the mapping process. So please welcome Dr. Phillips.
Thank you very much for that introduction, and good to be with you tonight, honorable commissioners. So let me take you through the slideshow that I have for you here, and then we can jump into some of the tools here. So could I see the next slide, please? So here we have our introduction to redistricting, and here we see the existing districts as we have them now. Next slide, please. So I covered the criteria pretty in depth last meeting, but I can certainly do so again. It's always important to really make sure that we're on the same page as far as what the guiding rules and goals are for this process. And so, just as a refresher, we have two sources of law. We have federal and state. When it comes to federal, we have the standards that we have received from Supreme Court cases as far as drawing districts that are equal in population. They don't have to be exactly equal, though. They have ruled that anything within a 10% total deviation is considered presumptively constitutional. So we have some wiggle room, but it shouldn't be too far off from equal population for each district based on the 2020 census results as adjusted by the statewide database for prisoner populations. So we have that full and complete official data available now. And so we can start using that data as we think about what draft maps might look like. We also have from federal law, the Federal Voting Rights Act, which entails not doing anything to dilute the voting strength or power or influence of protected class groups, those who are historically marginalized or disadvantaged. We would want to protect their right to elect candidates of their choice. But on the flip side, not practice what is called a racial gerrymandering, where you make race or ethnicity the only or main consideration when drawing your district boundaries. So those are what have been decreed by the courts and Congress. And now we can turn to what the California State Legislature has decreed. And that is, this comes from the Fair Maps Act that was passed a year or two back. And what we have here is a rank order of criteria. So you'll see that it's numbered 1, 2, 3, and 4. And that is because the state recognizes that it may not always be possible to satisfy all the criteria due to the nature of redistricting. Trade-offs are involved. So in that case, if you can't satisfy all of them, you would prioritize those that are higher in the list. So the number 1 criterion is to draw districts that are contiguous in that they're just one piece each, not disconnected pieces. Second is to not divide neighborhoods and communities of interest, which you might consider to be socioeconomic geographic areas that should be kept together. Third is to follow easily identifiable boundaries like major roads, highways, railroads, creeks, etc. And fourth is to draw districts that are compact in that they do not bypass one group of people to get to a more distant group of people. And then you see this prohibition at the bottom against favoring or discriminating against a political party. So this is, when it comes to following state law, it's totally nonpartisan considerations. So once you have ensured that all the federal and state criteria have been followed, then you may consider other redistricting principles, such as minimizing voters shifted to different election years, respecting voters' choices or the continuity in office, which goes back to what we were talking about earlier, where dealing with incumbent locations. Third is to consider if there's any future population growth that you can account for in a slight degree. And lastly, preserving the core of existing districts. So those are all the criteria that we have to or may follow. So next slide, please. So here we have a demographic summary of the city's population, district by district. And last time I presented to you, I had to give a couple disclaimers, and now I no longer have to give any disclaimers. The The first disclaimer was that it was raw census data. Now we have the official prisoner adjusted data in this table. The second disclaimer I gave was that it was based on whole census blocks, because sometimes the district boundaries go through census blocks. But we went through a process where we split blocks that were on the boundary between different districts. So we have the best possible idea of how many people live in each of the districts. And so you'll see here that we have a total city population just under 89,000. And if we take that 88,928 total figure and divide it by 6 districts, we see that each of the 6 districts must contain about 14,820 people. And given the 10% total deviation threshold that we talked about with what the courts have decreed, we can have a maximum deviation of 1,482 between the most and least populated district. So given that, we see that the most underpopulated district is District 3, which is the West Side District. And that is 1,626 people underpopulated, or just about 11%. On the flip side, the most overpopulated district is District 4, which is the Hills and Riviera area. And that district is overpopulated by just over 1,400, or about 9.5%. So if we add these two values, the 11% and the 9.5%, we get a total population deviation of just about 20.5%. So that would be twice the limit of what we want to have for our population deviation. So there do have to be some pretty significant adjustments made to get it within the 10% threshold. So you see also we have a racial ethnic breakdown for each district, both for the total population, including citizens, non-citizens, children, adults, everyone counted by the census. And then here we're just looking at the citizen voting age population. So those who are citizens of voting age, so basically the voting eligible population. And so we see that when looking at the total population, districts 1 and 3 stand out for their high percentages of the Hispanic Latino populations, close to 2/3 in each district. When we look at the citizen voting age population, however, those percentages go down, so that in District 1, Hispanics are still the plurality, but they are not quite a majority of the population of the citizen voting age population in District 1. In District 3, the non-Hispanic whites become the plurality, and Hispanics are a close second. And then in every other district, non-Hispanic whites are the vast majority of the citizen voting age population. So we want to look at citizen voting age population in particular when we're thinking about how we can follow the Federal Voting Rights Act, because the courts, at least the Ninth Circuit Court, has ruled that when it comes to Voting Rights Act compliance, this is the key data point to look at, the citizen voting age population, broken down by race and ethnicity. So that's a bit of the demographic summary. Next slide, please. So we also—
Can I ask a question, Dr. Phillips? Is there a case citation on that? Because I know there's been a lot of discussion in the recent past about whether the federal people divide districts by voters as compared to by total population, including non-voters. So I'm just a little surprised to hear that the voting age population is the most significant number.
Well, I don't mean to say that we have to have equal numbers citizen voting age population in each district. I mean to say that when it comes to looking at the Federal Voting Rights Act and making sure we're not doing anything that would dilute the voting power of a particular protected class, we want to look at where individuals of a certain group of the citizen voting age population are concentrated, and
factor in that criteria. Then,
yeah, it would be the main factor in that criteria. But when it comes to the equal population criterion, we use the total population that's at the very top row of that chart.
Okay.
Honorable Chair Johnson, commissioners, we'd be happy to provide a memo with authority for you.
I'd find it interesting. Thank you.
Will do.
Shall I continue?
Please. Thank you. Sorry for the interruption.
No worries. Yeah, feel free to interrupt me at any time. So next, I just want to say a brief word about defining neighborhoods, because when it comes to satisfying the Fair Maps Act, this is one of the top criteria as far as order of priority. And so we want to ask about what the neighborhoods are and what their geographic boundaries are. And you see examples of physical features that might define such a boundary. So we do hope to receive public testimony about important neighborhoods that are meaningful to people and that we should respect during this process. But if we don't get that testimony, we do have planning records and other similar documents that provide that definition. The city has officially defined a list of neighborhoods with well-defined boundaries that I will be showing once I demonstrate the story map in a bit here. Next slide, please. So going beyond neighborhoods, we have this additional term, communities of interest. So when we're talking about this criterion, we again want to ask two questions. First, what defines the communities in the city? So like neighborhoods, we're talking about geographic areas, but it's combined with some shared issue or characteristic, often social or economic, that would be impacted by city policies. So we would like to hear about what these communities are and where they are. But secondly, we want to know, would such a community benefit from being included within a single district for purposes of its effective and fair representation? And the quotes are there because that is taken directly from the Fair Maps Act. So the law recognizes that there might be communities of interest that would benefit more from having multiple representatives on the council. So it only requires keeping intact a community that would benefit from just having one representative. And so when we're talking about communities of interest, we're not talking about anything that has to do with political parties, incumbents, or political candidates. So this is an abstract, nonpartisan consideration. Next slide, please. So now we get to discuss the mapping and map review tools that we've made available. And I do want to make a distinction here because some of the tools you can actually allow you to actively map and draw your own districts, while there are other tools that are review tools that it's not for drawing your own districts, it's for looking at different data and considering what is shown there. So we have different tools for different purposes and for different levels of comfort and interest. The first of these is the story map, which is a simple tool for thinking about neighborhoods and communities of interest and exploring different data. Related to that is the interactive review map, which is a simple tool for viewing multiple data layers from the story map at once and for reviewing draft maps once they are posted. So once we have the draft maps ready, they will go up on that web page. We also have paper and Excel-based simple draw draft map tools that allow people who aren't as comfortable with computers to print out a map and draw on it and submit that. We also have an easy easy to use draft map online tool called Dave's Redistricting app, or DRA, which I can demonstrate how to use. And lastly, we have a powerful data-rich draft map tool called MOR, which is coming soon, hopefully by December, and we'll make that available for those who would like to have the full suite of tools and data at their disposal. So whether you use the powerful but complicated online mapping tool, Excel, the paper kit, or just draw on a napkin, we welcome your maps in any form they take, and we will present all the maps in a standard form to the commission. So at this point, I would like to exit the PowerPoint and demonstrate where you can find these tools and how they work. So if you would like to pause for questions here, that's I can take your questions, or if you would like me to move straight to the demonstration, I can do that as well.
Judge White or Judge Khan, any questions?
No questions.
No.
I'm ready to move on.
Okay, so I'm going to share my screen and pull up the website for the Santa Barbara City redistricting page. So I'm going to go to the home page here, and you will see that it's found at this web address, but you can just Google Santa Barbara City redistricting, and that will take you to this page. So it's on the city website, Independent Redistricting Commission, and you see all the information for the meetings, agendas, and schedules, etc. So if you look to the left here, you will see there's a link to a secondary page called Draw a Map. So I click on that, and I'm taken to this page, which lays out the full suite of tools. So the first of these is the Storymap. And if I click on that link, it will take me to a separate website, and it is called City of Santa Barbara 2021 Redistricting. And this is where you'll see a lot of data that is available for identifying neighborhoods and communities of interest. If you scroll down, the first page you will see is a map of the officially defined neighborhoods of the city of Santa Barbara. So if you click on the button, it will just show you the neighborhoods, and you will see that the city has defined neighborhoods, which will be very useful in the process when it comes to making sure that we're following the Fair Maps Act. If we do not receive any public testimony to the contrary, we would want to do our best to avoid dividing any of these neighborhoods in order to satisfy the Fair Maps Act. But we can also, if you want to click different buttons, you can get access to different data layers, such as the current city council districts. So you can continue to scroll down to see other pieces of information like school attendance areas and zip codes. So if you ever want to just focus on one piece of data, just click on a button and it will show you that data. And if you want to know what the colors mean, click on the button at the bottom left and it will show you the legend. And you can see this is showing you different area codes, or zip codes, I should say. So that is the story map. You can scroll down and see other pieces of information like zoning. So you can see what areas the city defines as higher density residential versus lower density residential versus commercial. Again, click this button to see what the colors mean. Scrolling down further, you can see the citizen voting age population by race, ethnicity. So there are no significant concentrations of Asians or Blacks in the city, but if you click on % Latino, you will see that we do have some significant concentrations, especially in this part of the city, around the Milpas corridor, and also in the West Side area. And so this, if you want, again, click on this to see what the colors mean. Basically, the warmer the color, the higher the percentage. So greens, yellows, and red indicate greater percentages. So again, when it comes to Voting Rights Act compliance, we would want to avoid doing anything that would dilute these concentrations. And you can see we have other demographics of interest as well, which could be useful in determining communities of interest, such as % renter housing. We see that there's a much higher percentage of renters in the inner part of the city, as opposed to the hills to the north or the mesa. So that is the story map that we've made available. Going back to the website, we have an interactive review map as well. And the interactive review map takes all the data layers that you can see on the story map and puts them in one place so that the user can choose to display whichever data layers they want at one time. So if you want to compare elementary school attendance areas, you can check it. And if you want to compare that with the neighborhoods, you can check that. And so you can see how those areas overlap. And if you want to change the base map gallery, you can go here at the top left, and maybe you want to see a satellite view, and you can click on that. If you want to see the legend, click at the top left here, and you can see what the colors mean and what school they're referring to. If you want to zoom in, click on the plus in order to go down closer. And to pan, you just click and drag in order to see a different part of the map. So like I said, this is the place where we will eventually be posting the draft maps once they are available, both public submissions and any maps that we as demographers draw for this project. So they will be listed as one of the layers that you see here. So now I will go back and show you what the paper maps look like. We have English and Spanish versions of these maps. So clicking the first link, you'll see we have the English version, and this is what we call the basic paper tool, where all you need is this. You can print it out and draw on a pen, and you would have the opportunity to draw 6 districts and use the population totals that you see for each of these population units that we defined to come up with 6 districts that are equal in population. And so you see there are instructions at the bottom right about how many people need to live in each district and what the maximum difference is between the largest and smallest district. So if someone wanted to use the paper map like this, they would have to manually calculate how many people live in each district. So they would draw a district, then add up all the numbers to get a total for that district and do that 6 times. So this is very simple, but the downside is it's easy to make a mistake, and if you're not careful about adding up your numbers. So in that case, it might be better to use one of the paper maps with the Microsoft Excel spreadsheet. So with this, you have a different map that you use for that. It's a paper map with population ID numbers. So if you look at that, you will be taken to a map that has the same population units that is on the other version, but rather than showing population totals, it shows ID numbers. And you use these ID numbers when you refer to these ID numbers as you use the Microsoft Excel supplement. And you'll find that supplement right below that. So you see that there's a link, and all of these have English and Spanish versions. But if you were to click on this link, you will be taken to a spreadsheet that enables you to assign the population units to different districts. So I think I have to share my screen with another window open here. So hold on here. So hopefully you can see this now. You have an Excel spreadsheet that has 3 different tabs. The first has instructions for how to proceed. The second has assignments. So if you were to, let me zoom in so it's easier to see here. The yellow cells are where you would assign populations to a certain district. So you might decide that you want to give all of these population units to District 1, in which case you would just type in a 1 to indicate that you want these units to go in District 1. And as you assign units, you will see that the population at the top is accumulating as you add more units to this district. So you'll see at the left here, the population of the district, and to the right, you'll see how close it is to the ideal. So as I assign units, this number will increase and this number will decrease, get closer to 0. And eventually I'll want something that's about 14,000. So that gets pretty close. I've now assigned 14,170 people to District 1, which is 651 people under the ideal. So you could, you would do the same thing for the other 6 districts. And then you would go to the results tab to figure out how population balanced your map is. So the nice thing about this tool is Excel does the math for you. And you can see District 1 has a deviation of minus 4.4%. And so once you assign the other 5 districts, then you will eventually be able to see at the right here, a total population deviation. If it's over 10%, it will be red, but if it's under 10%, it will be green. And so that will tell you if it's balanced or not. We also have the ability to look at the citizen voting age population by race or ethnicity. And so you'll see that the District 1 that I created has a 19% Hispanic citizen voting age population and 74% non-Hispanic white. So I've now briefly demonstrated tools 1, 2, 3, and 4, which now leads me to tool 5, which is the DRA tool. And this is the one that allows you to draw your own districts like you can with the paper mapping tool, but it's an online tool and it has a finer resolution where you can do it block by block. So there are some steps that need to be followed in order to use this tool properly. The first is to go to the DRA site, davesredistricting.org. So if I click on that, it'll take me to this homepage. And once you're there, you will need to create an account in order to create and submit district maps. So I already have created an account, so I'm going to log in using my credentials. So once I log in, now I return to the redistricting website, and I would want to click on one of these two links that you'll see here. There are two templates for the city of Santa Barbara, one that is blank and another that has the existing districts. So if you use the blank template, then you're essentially starting from scratch. You're not referring to the existing districts at all. You're just starting fresh. So if I click on this, I'll show you what that looks like. It may take 20 to 30 seconds to load, but once it loads, you will be able to see that it zooms in on a map of the city, and you will then, okay, here we go. So here we have the city laid out here, and as you can see, there are no districts. It's a total blank template, so it's up to you as the user to decide what the districts should look like. So you would then need to click on the paintbrush tool to make an editable copy of this map. So that will create your own version that you can give your own name to and submit it. So I'm going to click on that, and it's going to ask to duplicate the map. You can make an editable copy of this map. Is that what you want to do? And I'm going to say yes. And let's see. So I might need to refresh in order to for it to pop up under my maps. So let me do that. Oh, there it goes. So the one downside of this site is it's kind of slow because there's a lot of users that make use of it. So you may have to be patient at times for things to appear. So now I see it. So what I'm going to do is click the check mark, and I'm going to edit my copy. So now I have, and it should zoom in onto the Santa Barbara area. Once, okay, here we go. So notice how it says copy of Santa Barbara City Council blank template. So what you're going to want to do as a user is to click this title and give it a unique name. You may decide to give it your own name if you want, or give it some other name. I'm going to say Daniel Demo #1, and it's helpful to give a description. These districts make sense because ... And you can click submit. So notice how the title has been changed. And now I can start the process of actually drawing my districts. And so in order to do this, I do want to point out at the bottom right, at the right side of the page, you'll see we have two important data points. The first is total population adjusted 2020. And so this is the official data that is adjusted for prisoner populations. So this is what we want to use when determining whether our districts are population balanced. Then under that, you'll see citizen VAP 2019. So the citizen voting age population that the American Community Survey measured most recently in 2019, which is the most recent data we have. And you'll see it's broken down by race, ethnicity. So that would be for looking at voting rights compliance. So in order to start, you would want to pick your target district. So right now it's selected the District 1 as the blue district. And so you would then want to zoom into the place you want to start drawing District 1. So you would click the plus sign to zoom in, and then it's already on the pan. So all you have to do is click and drag in order to move to a certain part of the city. So I'm going to start drawing District 1 where I live, which is this part of the city. Now, something that you should know is that it's you may want to look at the overlays. So I would check background map so that you can see the streets, and that will enable you to have a better idea of what you're looking at here. The other thing to note is the geographies that are being shown are precincts. So we encourage users to click on the block option because this will enable them to have a smaller resolution. And what I mean by that is after you select the block and then you select the paintbrush, when you click on a precinct, it will actually break it up into smaller pieces, the census blocks. So what used to be one precinct has now been broken up into 3 blocks. And this is the smallest unit of resolution that we have official population data from. So after I click on a precinct to shatter it, then I can start drawing. And all it entails is clicking in order to color it in. And so you'll see that I've added 611 people to District 1. I will now click in this precinct to shatter it. And then you see that I can now select all of those. If you are confident that you want to select everything that is in a particular precinct, all you have to do is click precinct and that will get everything in here. But if you want to be more narrow about it, click on block, click in a precinct, and maybe let's say you only want this part of the precinct. So you click on those blocks. And then if you want this part to be in District 2, you go to the district selector and click the green so that you're selecting for District 2, and you can paint in those. So the nice thing is you aren't bound by the precincts. You can split precincts. And this is important because it may not be desirable to just base the maps off of precincts because they're pretty large in area and you may not be able to get population balanced districts using only precincts. So that is kind of the simplest demonstration of how this works. If you want to go to statistics up here, you can click on that and you can see how many people have been assigned to each district and how far off it is from the ideal. You see all the number of people that are still unassigned. None of them have, none of districts 3, 4, 5, and 6 have gotten any people yet. And you'll see that if we go here, we can see the demographics by citizen voting age population. So going back to the map, you can, if you made a mistake, you can click the erase tool and click in here. Maybe I want to give these blocks to District 3 instead, in which case I'll erase them, click the purple, and I'll make sure that you're now using the paintbrush tool again, and you can give those to District 3. So let's see. I think those are the main points about how to use this tool. You will eventually want to have a total population deviation that is under 10%. And so once that is accomplished, then you can submit the map. So let me show you how you would do that. You would, your map is automatically saved. So you would, once you're done, you would click on the maps icon at the very top here, not to be confused with map, singular. But if you click on this, you will be taken to the map that you created. Then you could check that and click publish. And this will enable it to be published for greater consumption and for people who are outside of your account to be able to visualize this. And this is important because in order for it to be considered as a draft map for this process, it needs to be published by clicking the publish button. And then an email should be sent to irc@santabarbaraca.gov, letting us know that your map name has been submitted, and this is the title of the map, Daniel Dembo #1, and you want your map to be considered in this process. So that is how you publish your map and make it known to us that it has been published and you want it considered. So I will pause here to see if my colleague Dr. Johnson has anything to add. Is there anything I might have missed about DRA that's important for people to know?
No, I think you covered it well. It takes a couple minutes to figure it out, but once you figure it out, you can just zoom right through it. People are loving it on our other projects.
Yeah, great, thank you. So yeah, I'm happy to take your questions about any of the tools I demonstrated.
Well, I have a question. So far, I'm looking at population distributions, and that's fine. That gives us equal numbers, which is one of the goals. But then, when one considers communities of interest, one is to define, first of all, what a community of interest truly is, and then, try and overlay that onto the maps with the numbers that you've assigned to see if there's any now need to change those, because that becomes an important element in ultimately, coming up with a boundary that's acceptable and complies with election law and all the other criteria that you've laid out. So how does one then, now you've distributed all these areas into equal numbered districts, how do we then deal with the issues of communities of interest and taking into consideration the Banala's case, now having to factor in, some of the requirements that are mandated by that settlement?
So you would want to ideally receive public testimony about what the meaningful communities of interest in the city are, and whether these communities of interest would benefit from having one representative or multiple representatives. And so if we receive testimony that, say, for instance, downtown would be a community of interest that might benefit from having one representative or maybe multiple, that would be helpful to know, so that if it's the former, then we would want to make efforts to keep it in one district. If it's the latter, then we can maybe separate it. But we do have this other requirement from the law about not dividing neighborhoods. And we do have a pretty well-defined list of neighborhoods with well-defined boundaries. And there is a little downtown neighborhood, and given that it's been defined by the city as a neighborhood, then we would probably want to avoid splitting that unless we receive a lot of testimony that would say otherwise. So we would want to get this information ideally at the front end, and then we would use that information as we get into the map drawing process and create districts that are equal in population and satisfy the Voting Rights Act by not diluting concentrations of protected class voters. Does that answer your question?
Well, I'm still trying to visualize how communities of interest as it relates to neighborhoods. Yeah, that might be easier to deal with when you're compacting those neighborhoods and also identifying communities of interest and seeing if the boundary that you selected with the relative population numbers, corresponds with that. But it doesn't, I'm listening to the tools that you are describing, and I'm trying to visualize how these communities of interest can be quantified by way of districts so that they can be overlaid onto these population districts to see if you're not only satisfying the equal numbers in each district as far as 14,820, but also putting people in communities in that district that have the same interests. So is there, where is the tool for that?
Daniel, let me add a little bit on that. So this is where, different people will disagree about the boundaries of the communities of interest, and where your discretion and judgment really has to come in, where you'll collect maps, you'll get maps from residents, and we can show you the city neighborhood maps and things like that. But then it comes down to your judgment as you look at those maps and decide what justify moving a line here or there, and does a proposed map follow what you consider your communities of interest. There is, our job would be much easier if there was the golden map of all communities of interest. But unfortunately, community of interest, as you'll see, community of interest definitions often conflict and overlap, and people disagree. So that's where your judgment comes in, and you have to look at the maps compared to the communities, the list that you have in your head and paper in front of you.
Dr. Johnson, I want to reinforce that. That's why we have an independent redistricting commission. I hope that, as Dr. Phillips says, you're presented with evidence that helps you define those communities of interest. But it does come down to your judgment and wisdom. I would also like to ask a question of my own when appropriate, Chair Johnson.
Please go ahead. But let me make sure Judge Kahn doesn't want to have any follow-up on this point.
Well, it helps us certainly if we have a clear understanding of the definition, whether it exists in case law or whether it exists statutorily, that gives us a good feel for what is the definition of a community of interest. If I have a bunch of folks that live near the water and they want to make sure that there's enough slips for their boats and enough housing that puts them close to the boat, is that clearly a community interest? Or I have another neighborhood that is comprised of, these, I think I mentioned it once before, older, antique historic homes. And I want to make sure we're kept in the same neighborhood, because I want the city council to pay attention to roads and sidewalks and lamps and everything else now that is a lot older than in other areas of the city that I want to have preserved. And then, there's ethnicity. That's certainly important. We know we have to address that too. But so that we have a good feel to do our job as best we can. And we're all pros at listening to evidence and drawing conclusions. That's what we do. That's what we've done for a living for years and years and years. But we are guided by principles. So my question is, where do we find those guiding principles?
You find it from the state law as defined by the Fair Maps Act, and it says a community of interest, and I'm quoting here, is a population that shares common social or economic interests that should be included within a single council district for purposes of its effective and fair representation. Communities of interest do not include relationships with political parties, incumbents, or political candidates.
I would imagine that much of this will become more clear as we hear at the public hearings what the interests are in the various communities. And I think then we are probably better able to apply the criteria to what we hear.
And if I might, my recollection is that Ms. Sosa Acosta briefed a portion of this in her paper in the summer.
Yeah, I recall she did.
It's still kind of intangible until we actually hear from live people, as Judge White just said. You'll get a feel for it then.
But our hope is that the data that we've made available on the Storymap and also the interactive review map, such as historic districts and concentrations of certain demographics like renters and school attendance areas, all of those can serve as ideas for people to think about what their communities of interest might be. And so we're hoping that public testimony will inform that, but if we don't get that testimony, then we can at least look at those and think about ways to respect those areas.
One of the things you said, Mr. Cullen, go right ahead.
Thank you, Your Honor. This may be a hard question, but how do we assure our skeptical public of the integrity of both the data and the computational tools?
So it's all public is the main thing of the data that's used in the tools. We're happy to give as a GIS file for those that have GIS software, as an Excel file for those that just want the raw data. Not just the maps are public, but every piece of data involved in this project is public.
Are the formulas in the Excel spreadsheet accessible, and how do we confirm or validate the accuracy of the computations that Dave's does?
So yes, the formulas are accessible. For those that know Excel, we actually protect the pages so that people don't accidentally mess up the formulas by hitting the wrong key, but there's no password on the protection. So anyone that wants to turn off the protection just goes up to the menu command and turns off the protection. So they can access all the formulas, all the raw data. If they want to, they can go back to the state website and pull the original data down themselves to get that. So it's all totally transparent. And when the Dave's maps are submitted, then we pull them into our system and run them through our demographics. And so the Dave's data will get double checked in that manner.
I'd only editorialize that that's a question.
Registration is irrelevant and must be neither favored nor discriminated against. So my question was, why in the list of demographics did we have partisan registration? Did you see that? At one point, it told you when you were working with the last map, it said partisan registration, Republican versus Democrat, I think, and then as well as, Latino, non-white, Hispanic, all that kind of thing. Why is that in there?
You're talking about in the Dave's redistricting app?
Yeah.
Yeah, we can double check. We can hide that data. And on our project, it should be set to be hidden. Dave's was originally written as a tool for the public to use to analyze possible partisan gerrymandering at the state level. So in the back end, there actually are very powerful tools for power users that want to get into it for people using it at the state level. So there is a command that we give it for local government that says hide all the partisan data, and we'll double check to make sure that's checked. But it is there, and if someone really wanted to go get it, they could find the command to uncheck that and access it.
You know, it feels like it's something when you finish, you get towards the end, maybe you would want to double check yourself and see, did I just turn them into 3 Republican and 3 Democratic districts inadvertently or something like that? But to have it up front felt a little disconcerting because we've gone out of our way to say that that's not a factor. That's why I noticed it.
Correct. And under the Fair Maps Act, you're not allowed to consider the partisan impact of the map. So we'll double check to make sure it's turned off.
And what we will, when we present the maps to the commission, we will not be presenting them as you see on Dave's Redistricting app. We will be presenting them in a standard format that has a different color for each district. And there would be none of that information that is actually presented to the commissioners. It would, if it is at all visible, it would just be by individual members of the public who want to see that.
I'm not sure I understood that. When we see the maps, you'll norm them somehow so that the variety of types you get will get all in the same format. But what information will we not see on it?
We will not be showing you anything that shows the number of people from a certain party who live in a certain district.
Right. Okay. But the other data we will see, the other demographics.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Other questions from the commissioners?
No questions.
I'm waiting for practice to make perfect because it feels a little daunting, but it also feels like if you just buckle down and do it, you can do it. So I'm hoping that's the case.
Yeah, and we also have a tutorial or a user guide, you might say, that is also on the, I think we do have a, I don't know if we've actually linked it to this, the redistricting website, but we'll make sure to have a link to that. And it links to a page that we have on our website that explains the step-by-step how to do this.
Is there someone that we can contact if we're having problems?
A hotline for us?
As commissioners, yes. For the general public, one of the beauties of Dave's is that it's been around as a state level tool for 16 years, I think. So there's a ton of users and user communities on the web that help people out. I actually sent them a help request about 3 days ago and got an answer back from the Dave's staff in about 20 minutes. So they are available for the public. For the commissioners, of course, we'll help you out. And the other piece too is, keep in mind as commissioners, your ultimate job is to pick a map. We're here to help you draw. So you're free to try it out and use it as much as you want, but don't feel like you have to.
Any other questions from the commissioners? All right. Thanks. Anything more we need to try to jam into our head at 7 o'clock after a 12-hour day?
Is there some kind of, and I mean, I don't say this to create some, chilling effect on submitting proposed boundary maps, but is there some, basic fundamental criteria that weeds out maybe maps that don't appear to deal with the fundamentals that are, we are all being told we have to be guided by, so that if, for example, someone wants to submit multiple maps, and then you have a lot of people submitting multiple maps, and not to say that a map isn't as important as another, but it becomes an inefficient use of our time to look at, let's say, 500 maps. So is there a a way that we are looking at maps that have a little bit of substance, rhyme, or reason to them.
Yes. So when we present the draft maps after the initial deadline has passed and post those to the website, the interactive review map, we will post every single map that we receive. We don't weed out any maps, but what we will do is when we present them to you, we will flag maps that are obviously in violation of some of the more cut and dry criteria, like population, like if it's more than 10% total deviation, we would flag that and put them all to the side in a sense, but still show you them, but maybe just like on one slide. And then you might do the same for districts that are not contiguous or maybe flagrantly violating the Voting Rights Act by, like if they have a boundary that goes right through the Milpas area, that would be something we would flag. And so we can kind of quickly set those maps aside and then turn to the ones that we might call viable contenders. And then we can group these into themes that allow you to really have a good sense of what the different options are.
Do the parties who would submit a map that was clearly going to be unacceptable get told that they're not going into the mix because of X, Y, or Z reasons? Or do they ever know that?
Dr. Johnson, is that standard practice to inform everyone who would not be viable that they aren't viable?
Oh, a lot of it depends on how many maps we get. If we only have a few people drawing maps, then yeah, we're happy to get back to them if they submit in time for us to get back to them. I mean, one thing to clarify is all the maps will go into the mix, so they'll all be available to you and presented to you. Just the ones that aren't population balanced or they have some other big problem will have a big red stamp at the beginning saying, just so you're aware these maps came in, you can see the ideas that they had, but you can't consider it. So you'll kind of pass over those fairly quickly, but they will be in the mix.
Then that answers that question. Then no one has to be told we're not being able to see their map, however crazy it may be, we're going to see it.
Yeah.
No, however non-viable it may be, we're going to see it.
Yeah. I would add for people watching this video later or watching now, one thing we really emphasize is that yes, residents can submit multiple maps, but every so often we get someone who just is having fun with the tool, and we make the point to them of if they can't choose a map that they think is best from their group, how would they expect the commissioners to do so? And it's actually a really good way to get all of your maps dismissed, is to send in 10 without saying this one's the best and please consider it. So I do encourage the public who may be watching this to feel free to submit a map and then to submit a map they consider better or one or two alternates. But if they start sending in 7 or 8 or 9, 10 maps, then they need to pick one that's their main submission.
Thanks. All right. No other questions? Thank you very much. Enlightening and just a tad overwhelming.
So I believe that there might have been one more slide on the presentation just to close it out. So if whoever is running the slideshow can put that back up again, then we can turn to that. So this is my final slide, and it's just to prompt discussion and hopefully some testimony from members of the public about important neighborhoods and communities of interest that we should be aware of, as well as any questions about the mapping tools. So this is the slide leading into the public comment.
Okay, Dr. Phillips, did you say we're ready for public comment?
Ready when you are.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right. Okay, so as I mentioned before, if anyone from the public would like to say something, please raise your hand. If you're speaking on behalf of just an individual yourself, you'll have 10 minutes. And then if you're speaking on behalf of a group, you will be allotted 15 minutes. So if anyone would like to say anything, please raise your hand and I can unmute you. Okay, I don't see any attendees raising their hand at this point in time. So I think we might be okay to move forward.
Thank you, Jocelyn. So next we will highlight a future agenda item. Next slide, please. Our next hearing will take place in District 1. We are hoping to have it actually in person at Franklin Elementary School. Please note that this hearing will take place on a Saturday and it will be in the morning. We plan to let you know in advance if for some reason we are unable to hold this hearing in person, for example, due to developments with COVID-19. But other than that, I want to allow the Honorable Commissioners time to speak on the next upcoming hearing or any future agendas for other hearings.
Could I ask about that? As many of us who can attend will, I have it on my calendar, barring something untoward happening, I plan to be there. What staff will we have there with us, including people with expertise to assist anyone there who wants to take a hand at drawing a map?
So ahead of time, we will have already had an opportunity for the public to submit their maps. But in addition to that, during the hearing, we are going to have our interpreters for Spanish and American Sign Language, as well as our demographers to assist in answering any questions that the public may have.
Thanks. Go ahead. Any other questions on this? Okay, go right ahead then. Are we going to limit ourselves to the January 8th meeting or review any of the others? I think we all probably have them on our calendars, but.
For today's hearing, we just limited to the upcoming hearing for District 1. But if you would like at future hearings, we could have further slides to detail the upcoming hearings besides the next one. On our redistricting website, we actually do have a calendar of all the hearings available for viewing.
I just want to make sure that there wasn't something more, a slide that I had rushed us to. All right. I think that is all of the business for today. Is that correct?
Yes, thank you.
Anything else from any of the commissioners or the staff that we should be thinking about?
Well, let me inquire. So we have a little bit of structure. Is staff going to propose, the order of business on January the 8th? For example, the commissioners will have proposed boundaries submitted to them for some preliminary review as it relates to District 1. And then, the second order of business will be to hear perhaps from some of the people who have drawn up those boundaries. And then how do we limit that so it's manageable in terms of hearing from those people within this time slot of an hour and a half, are there going to be limits with regard to how much time they can speak? And are they going to be required not to just talk about population numbers for their proposed boundaries, but why they want to protect those boundaries because they believe that, you know, there are significant interests that need to be protected. So I'm just, you know, trying to figure out what the order of business might be at such a public hearing.
Thank you, Honorable Khan. To first start off, we do plan on having the public be able to comment on maps that have been posted onto the city's redistricting website at that time. And that's not necessarily limited to just commenting on District 1 itself, but rather allowing the opportunity, starting with District 1, for citizens of that district to be able to discuss their views, as well as we'll do the same for other districts later on. In addition to that, we've actually decided that we want to allow more time for public comment to not limit any different members of the public to be able to speak on their concerns regarding this matter, which is how it's been reflected during this public hearing and allowing more time allocated for public comment. And we also don't plan on refraining or limiting on what exactly they can comment on. This is an opportunity for the public to speak on a variety of different matters. It could actually even include communities of interest considerations that they may think are important, or upon certain public maps that have been submitted by themselves or others, if that helps paint the picture for you.
Well, so, yeah, somewhat, yes, but you know, my view is let people talk about whatever they want to talk about, but in order that it's managed in an orderly fashion, it can't be, you know, to me, there has to be some kind of, you know, agenda of what we're going to be doing so we can manage all the people that might have something to say, and then organize it in a way so it makes sense as it relates to specific areas that have been outlined as district number 1.
So you would suggest sort of a pre-printed agenda that would know these are the topics we intend to cover, and then maybe there'd be open comment if these don't include what you would like to talk about, and maybe follow some sort of city council style protocol where we have a list of people and they sign up to speak and we can call on them in order so that there's some.
Yeah, maybe something like that so that we're guided in a way that's fair to everyone, but gives them, you know, a certain amount of time to talk, but so as we can have as many people as possible speak. You can't let someone talk for huge amounts of time because they won't surrender their time to someone else. They'll use it all up. And some people are far more vociferous than others, and you will hear them talk for minutes on end. So
you would propose or suggest a time limit for the comments, whatever they may be, a 3 or 5 minute kind of limit as you'd have in a city council meeting?
Yeah, I think that would help make it more manageable.
Okay.
Perhaps we could get an idea on January 8 as to how many people wish to speak. And given the amount of time that's allocated, an hour and a half, we might be able to say, you know, everybody gets 10 minutes or everybody gets 15 minutes. If there are only 3 or 4 people, we might be able to manage it better. I would hate to give people an arbitrary 3 to 5 and then find out that there's only 2 people there.
Right. That's possible. Get the sign up before we actually begin the meeting, and then we can allocate the time. Just make a decision among ourselves as to what's a max. Is there some way we could help in drafting this sort of agenda item without having necessarily a whole meeting of this nature where we all have to gather together? maybe draft something and circulate it and let us just make comments to you about how we would kind of call the agenda that day?
Your Honor, the commission can't poll itself between meetings. However, the commission could delegate to you as chair the authority to approve the form of agenda.
Okay.
And consistent with the Brown Act, you certainly can, as Judge White described, allocate time based on the number of people who come to the meeting.
Would the other two commissioners be willing to delegate to me the authority to approve the form of agenda, ask the staff to create something? I think I have a pretty good understanding of what Judge Khan was talking about and what would be helpful to us.
I have complete confidence in you.
Oh.
That may be going a little too far, Judge White, but
Well, certainly I do too. I mean, I would, yeah, if we could do that, that doesn't run afoul of the Brown Act, and I would, you know, I would so recommend that you approve the agenda.
Okay.
You know, I mean, would our honorable chair be allowed to do that in consultation with staff without it running afoul of the Brown Act?
Yes, Your Honor.
I think that was the intention, right? You draft something, I take a look at it, make a few comments or whatever, and then we'd have it and circulate it before the meeting, essentially.
Great.
Okay. I'll be happy to do that. I will accept the delegation. Somehow I thought the benefit of being the chair was that you got to delegate work to the others, but that's okay. We'll do it correctly. I don't mind. It's all right with me. Okay. All right. Thank you, Judge Khan. I think it's a really good idea because otherwise we'd just be walking in and flying blind and yeah. Okay. All right. Anything else from the commissioners? Anything else the staff needs to bring up? All right. Well, thank you very much, Dr. Phillips and Dr. Johnson. That was very enlightening. You had my attention, and I've got about 3 pages of single space typed notes from it. So when I get to do it in practice, I'll at least have a little background here. Thank you. It was very, very well done. I'd like to entertain a motion to adjourn at this time.
So moved.
Second.
All right. I hope you all celebrate Veterans Day appropriately, remembering and thanking the right people, and we are adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.